Only about 10% of people in a typical company are actively using AI, while another 10% resist it, and the remaining 80% are willing but hesitant. Today's guest is on a mission to bridge this gap. Brandon Gell is head of studio and consulting at Every, a multimodal media company exploring technology's frontier. Brandon brings a founder's perspective from building and selling his own startup. He previously led Clyde, a fintech company that raised $50 million before being acquired. Brandon and Every are helping organizations move from AI experiments to real adoption, turning that cautious 80% into confident users. In this interview, we'll explore how Brandon is making AI practical at scale and what we can all learn from his approach. Brandon, welcome to Just Curious. When you hear about low AI adoption within enterprise,
Yeah, I
what's
have
your first
two
reaction?
kind of hot takes that I tell people when I first am introducing them to the work that we do at Every. So often people will say, we have a red team, we have an AI committee that's helping us figure out how to bring AI into our business. And I've never seen that work well. And the reason is kind of twofold. So one of them is the way that you work with AI right now is through a little text box. And that's just a format that nobody has any experience interacting with. And the result of having a text box as the format that you're interacting with software means that you need to be really verbose in the way that you ask it to do things. And that brings me to my second point, which is most people, to be good at interacting with AI, you have to be a good manager. You're giving a knowledge worker a task to go do. And most people are not managers and or are not good managers. And when you give a human a task to do and you explain it poorly, they do that task poorly. And AI is no different. So that's why adoption is low, because people will interact with ChatGPT, Claude, whatever their LLM is, ask it to do something, but in a poor way that doesn't explain what they really need, and then just decide this didn't work for me. You know, this AI stuff doesn't really work. There's kind of those two issues I found.
Yeah, yeah. And we're going to explore how you help resolve those two issues in a few minutes. Maybe we could start with a backstory on Every Consultant. How did Every Consulting come about? What gap did you see in the market? I mean, you just spoke to one, or we've spoken to one, which is low
Yeah, it started
adoption. But
really
yeah, tell me a little
organically.
bit about the
So
backstory around
Every
Every
itself,
Consulting.
multimodal media company, started just as a media company about 4 or 5 years ago, writing about what comes next. That was probably the best decision that we could have made, is just focusing on really high quality content that people can read, not so different from what you're doing. And people started reading about this and seeing that Every was sort of thinking about things differently and at the tip of the spear with a lot of this technology, both in the amount of time that we're spending thinking about it, but also putting it to work. And it was really organic. A lot of our readers started reaching out and saying, this is an interesting take. I hadn't thought about this perspective that you just described. This is a new technology that I'd never seen. Can you help me bring this into my business? So it was a very organically started from our own curiosity from exploring the technology ourselves to people wanting to do that within their own business, which kind of brings me, you didn't ask this question, but like it's a good segue to like what are our most successful projects? And our most successful projects are always when the CEO is obsessive about using this technology. And our least successful projects are when the CEO is like begrudgingly doing AI because that's what the world is doing. So it always comes from a place of, the best projects come from a place of curiosity.
Yeah. And I guess one of the things that maybe you can help do is instill that curiosity. Is that something that can be, taught or, incepted? What happens when someone comes to you and the top
Yeah,
down curiosity isn't
it's
there? How do you, is
it's
there a way
hard because like
to
the majority of people
navigate
don't
that?
have sort of like the insatiable curiosity that you kind of need with this technology right now, because you face, even though it's so good in your day-to-day use of it, you will face problems where it doesn't do what you need. And you need to have like the curiosity fortitude to kind of burst through that and keep asking it. You need to ask it 10 times to do the thing. And if you only ask it once and it doesn't work, like, and you give up, you're not going to be an adopter. So getting people curious is like half the battle, and creating that the cultural change inside of a business that we're all builders now is one of the things that we focus on the most. We do that in a very specific way, but that is sort of that is the dream that we are pitching people is get your team to be curious about this stuff and they will
Yeah.
all become builders.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of builders, you and Every are a team of makers. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like who is Every Consulting? How does being a maker or a
So every
builder
consulting
influence
is
the work that you do?
primarily myself, a guy named Alex Duffy, who is our head of AI training. Previously, he started a education company and he's like perfectly suited to lead our trainings. And he's like the most well-informed person that I know about AI. And then Dan Shipper, our CEO, is also involved in a lot of our projects. We lead the charge with our projects, but we have a really special way of staffing projects because we have the studio part of our business. So every consists of three primary functions: the media company, our consulting business, and our product studio. And our product studio has built Lex, Cora, Sparkle, and Spiral. But we also have a bunch of other stuff that we are playing around with and building and experimenting with. So often what we'll do in a consulting project is Dan, Alex, and I will like lead the charge with what the vision of the project is and executing on it primarily. But we might tap specific people in our studio that have skill sets that are needed for the type of project that we're doing to come in and help us. And they might be better at specific parts of working with AI than the three of us are. Having access to that talent, I think, is what makes our projects not successful. The three of us are the reason why it's so successful, but special. The reason why we can do like a lot of great work and different and a versatile amount of work.
Yeah. And maybe just to sort of play that back, you have a media company where you're exploring the future of technology and AI. You have a studio where you're building AI powered products. You mentioned a couple, and then you have a consulting business, and having that studio helps the consulting business in that you've got a bench of talent of people who are actually actively building an AI that can then leverage that experience and expertise, the having eaten their own dog food, so to speak, to help clients
Yeah.
do the same thing that you
Exactly.
all
And I
are
think
doing every day.
honestly, some of the best projects we have go the other way around, where we're working with a client and we discover a big problem in an industry or just a problem that all of us might encounter in a consulting project. And alongside that consulting client, we say, maybe this is an interesting product that should exist for the world. And that consulting client gets to like participate in the upside of that if we like choose to go do that together. So we learn all parts of the business learn so much from each other. And that's some of the best stuff that we write comes from stuff that we've built. So it's everybody's sort of
Yeah.
feeding everybody.
Yeah, Every. For people who are less familiar with Every, maybe you can quickly share a little bit more about the studio and some of the products you built so people have the context of understanding what problems you've solved yourself. Yeah,
Yeah, so
tell us a little bit
it
more
all
about
starts
the
with the
studio and
people.
what kind of products you've launched.
50% of every are successfully exited founders. 50% of every are actually trained engineers, although 100% of us write code now. And then all of us write. So a lot of the ideas that we have before just going straight to building something, we might actually write about it first to like process it and get feedback from our audience. The studio itself has 4 products. Happy to explain them if you think that'd be helpful. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a short
Lex
introduction to
is
each would be super helpful.
an AI powered word processor. It's like imagine if Google Docs from day one was built using AI and leveraging AI. So a lot of professional writers use it. Spiral is a tool, it's a repurposing tool. So if you have a body of work that you need to transform into something else, you can use that with Spiral. So like an article, transforming it into like a tweet or a LinkedIn post or a push notification or a title, all in a specific voice, tone, personality, and style. So a lot of marketing companies and agencies use that. Quora is a completely new take on email. It turns your email into a story and it creates a much calmer inbox for you, just focusing on the emails that really matter and taking all the emails that don't and allowing you to look at them at the end of the day in like a beautiful format. I get to my email like 10 times faster because of Quora. And then Sparkle it organizes your computer for you. It's so simple and people love it and it works really well. I don't organize a single thing on my computer anymore. I just download it or put it into a folder and I let Sparkle organize it for me. And that's a sneaky, powerful product and successful business. And our whole model and what we preach to our consulting clients is that every product we have is run by one person and built by one person, run and built by the same one person. And that's just something that would never be possible before um, we were blessed with AI.
Yeah. And so when it comes to consulting, you mentioned curiosity as an important ingredient to AI adoption. What's Every's philosophy or framework for successful AI adoption? You work with companies at different stages of adoption, presumably. What's the sort of the framework to get them from being initially curious to real,
It's honestly pretty similar to
experimentation
like
and
how we
implementation?
evaluate whether or not a studio product is going to work well. There needs to be a magical moment for a studio product to work well for us to realize that this is going to be something successful. And the same thing for a consulting project to be successful. What I mean by that is there are 100 people at a company, and 5% of them, 5 of them in this example are like really on board and use it every day. Those are like your sort of insatiably curious people. The other 95% of people um, haven't yet realized the power of it because they haven't had a magical moment um, with this technology yet. Maybe they've like seen magical moments, but they themselves in their own workday have maybe not experienced a magical moment. And the reason is there's nothing magical about it. You need to put in the work to build a prompt that does great work for you. So what we focus our consulting projects on are giving every single department and every individual a taste of those magical moments specific to what it is that they do day to day. So if you're on the accounting team, like what do you do day to day that will be taken off of your plate and feel like magic? We want to give that to you. We'll write a prompt. We'll interview. We'll understand what it is that you do. We will write a prompt or create a product or make a GPT that absolves you from a large portion of your work. And then during our sessions, we'll train you on how we made it. So at the end of the session, we give it to you. So you have this prompt, you have this tool. You've seen in our sessions, this is something I have to spend 3 hours a week on. Now I spend 5 minutes. You've seen us use it. So you're like, you just had that magical moment of experiencing it. And that's inspiring, typically enough for people to take what we've given them, which might be at like 80%, and to get it to 100%. So a lot of the work that we do a lot of training, but the bulk of the actual hours that we spend on a project are behind the scenes preparing for each training and building every tool.
Right. So key to adoption is a magical moment. Is a magical moment a solved problem, or how would you
Yeah.
define a magical moment? So people who
I
are
think it
wondering
needs to be
what's a
very
magical moment to
real.
them.
Like it needs to be hours saved or problems solved. Like making a cool picture is not like it's cool, but it's not going to be something that you start spending the majority of your time inside of. So
Right.
it needs to solve a real problem for people. And people need to see if I spend the hour perfecting this prompt or making this GPT, I feel confident that I will get to a place with it that it'll do the job that I need. Because where all of this falls apart is when we're all so busy and there's only a 50% chance that if I spend an hour doing something, an hour building a prompt, I won't be able to get it to do what I need. And I just wasted that hour when I could have just done that thing manually. So people need to have a high level of confidence that this thing is actually going to be able to do this work for them. And they can get that confidence by us sort of giving them a head start by building these tools for them. Yeah. And then, I mean, the best companies are the ones that like take that to a crazy, crazy level and like start enabling teams to build tools using Devin inside of a code base or use Bolt or Lovable to like create applications themselves. I'm talking about like customer support reps, like making tools themselves. We're not there yet. It takes a lot of work culturally to get there right now, but we will get there where everybody's building.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how do you go from that initial magic moment and presumably multiple magic moments where the team that is participating in this engagement with you have gotten a problem solved, and it's a problem that they wanted solved, and so now they're using these tools that you've built, whether they're prompts or GPTs or perhaps something a little bit more high fidelity. How do you typically go from, or how would you recommend people go from having those magic moments to what you just described, where people are using Devin or
Yeah,
Lovable
I mean, we're
to
in the
build products that solve
experimental
more
phase
problems?
of all of this. Like in the grand scheme of things, like what we're working with right now, are tools that are you kind of have to bend over backwards to like get to work. Even though it might feel so easy and feel so magical, like a year from now, it'll, this is just going to be like, we're not going to, it'll be unimaginable the stuff that we had to do to like get Devin to work, which is already incredible, get Lovable to like connect to a database or something.
Yeah.
So right now, I kind of go back to like the CEO like leading the charge or the executive team leading the charge. If you want to like truly adopt AI in your business, it starts right now because this is a new way of interacting with computers and people need to like start at the baseline of this. And it starts with everybody on the executive team asking their team in an almost annoying way, did you try that with ChatGPT? Did you try making a Claude project with this? Just being annoying about it until the team is starting to adopt it in their day to day, because it's just not it's not unbelievably convenient now. It probably will be at some point. It'll be like native, but it's not native, which means you need to like drive cultural change in order to actually start using it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to walk through an example of how you all work. It ends with a magic moment or a bunch of magic moments. Where does it start? And maybe we could use an example from one of your engagements to kind of walk through kind of step by step. Like, who came to you? What was the problem they were looking to
Yeah,
solve? And then let's go from there.
most of our like direct point of contacts are either CEOs, CPOs, or like HR professionals that like are leading the charge on education, or IT professionals who are like have been tasked with implementing AI into the business. So that's where the conversation starts. Our projects almost 100% of the time start with us interviewing the business and interviewing a cross section of the company. So that's like, if this is a PE firm, we're interviewing across every team and everywhere from associates to partners within that team. It's the same thing for a tech company or like a large conglomerate. So it always starts with these research phase. And the reason is AI is like a very custom tool that you end up implementing. We're all implementing the same tool. It's always going to be Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT or something like that, or one of the APIs. But the way that you interact with it is really specific to your business. And we use this first phase of interviewing all these different team members for us to create a mental map of what the business looks like and how the business operates.
Right. So the stakeholder comes to you, say in the case of the private equity firm, it's one of the partners, maybe it's the COO. They come to you and they say, hey, we think there's an opportunity to do our job better. And that job has multiple components to it. It's got an investing component. It's got a back office component. It's got a middle office component. You go out and you interview those individuals and you ask them,
Yeah.
what do you ask them? You ask them questions
We
about
ask them what they
their
do.
kind of day, and their
We're
kind of
not asking
workflows, and where the
anybody,
pain
how do you
points.
think that you could use AI?
Yeah.
Sometimes we ask them like if they are using it already, how are you using it? But most of the time we're asking them, what is it that you actually do day
Yeah.
to day? And the reason that we ask that is it is really hard to identify where in your life something is actually annoying. Because what ends up happening to us as humans is we just get so used to the annoying things that they no longer become annoying. They just become facts of life. And that's literally how every great company has started. Somebody recognized this is like kind of annoying, but we all do it anyway. Why? So we don't ask people how to use AI. We just ask them, tell me what you do. Show me what you do. Like, share your screen. Let's like get into it. And through that, we end up, I'll give you a great example. We worked on a project with this big hedge fund where their compliance team was handling hours and hours of day of processing information that all these different people from the company have sent them that the compliance team needed to process and make sure was compliant. These are presentations, these are reports, everything that like was going to the outside world had to go through this team, which is a pretty small team. And they basically just thought that was their job. My job to go through this content and make sure but that's not actually their job. Like it's their job is to protect the business, but their job isn't actually to like look at all of this stuff. That's just like what they have to do. But it's like hard to recognize that. So like that was an amazing tool that we ended up building them that like rather than this person going through all of this content, all of these teams basically just had access to a GPT. So they could go from like 30% compliant to 95% compliant. And then this person was basically just doing like the checking off to make sure that like it, finding anything that like the AI could find, which was very few things. And I love that story because it's just an example of where somebody could be doing so much more strategic work but they didn't even realize like their job is actually to do strategic work. And maybe the firm didn't realize that this person's job is to do strategic work.
Yeah. How do you translate all those interviews that help you understand what someone's day looks like? Like in the compliance case, you are hearing about what they're doing from 8 to 6 or 7 to 5 or whatever it is, all the different tasks that they're, completing to, I guess, like serve a job to be done here, which is, keeping the business safe. How do you kind of go from that like task-based understanding of what someone's day looks like to the understanding that actually what we're trying to do is, protect the company versus complete 10 tasks every day? Is it an easy kind of leap to make? Because it's not easy, I guess, for the organization maybe to realize that like they don't need to be doing each of those tasks. They just need to be serving that job.
It's
Are you able
tough.
to help them make that leap just having done
It's tough
this
because like
internally
I
and
think it depends on the type of client we have. We have some engagements with executive teams and CEOs that really want that. They want to be told, like, where is my business not being efficient? And they want us to be a really strategic partner. And they want us to tell them like tough things. And I find that actually with a lot of our clients that are like kind of older tech companies, that's a lot of what they want us to do for them. In addition to like obviously AI adoption, they want to figure out like how do we operate in this new world? What are like the principles that we need to understand in this new world? There's also clients that we have where like that's just not our job. Our job is to like build the GPT, get that compliance person, with more time on their hands, but not to then guide the team like where should that compliance person be, like what should they be doing instead. So it really depends on the client and like what it is
sure.
that they
Yeah.
are looking for. We're about to kick off a project right now where somebody actually wants us to track everybody's time. So it's not just going to be like this qualitative thing. It's going to be super quantitative about how much time am I actually getting back? How much time is my team getting back? And that's a big question for all of us. And this is going to be like a big question for like the world in the next 10 years. Like when 90% of my job is done by an AI, like what do I do? And there'll always be more things. Like this has just happened in history many, many
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to that example, you're interviewing the team, you're understanding what their days look like, and you're out of that, you're pulling problems that can be solved by AI. Tell me a little bit about that kind of next step. How do you go from having done, 5, 10, 15, 30 interviews to,
Yeah.
taking a
So
next step towards
the
building
end
something?
result of this is we put it all together in a document that we call Paradigm. Paradigm has all of the things that we think that like the team should be doing with AI. It also has like a security stance or what tools we recommend that you use. So it's a pretty robust way of like, here's how your company should use AI and adopt AI, and here are going to be the challenges. We also give people access to the raw interviews that we do. So we basically transcribe every interview. And then in this tool that we built, you can chat with individual interviews, you can chat with entire departments, you can chat with the whole company. So it's like an amazing way for an executive team to actually get like pretty raw access to what it is that their team is doing day to day. You may understand as a CEO like what somebody's function is, but you may not really know what it is that they actually do. So that's just like a cool thing that comes out of this. And where we go from there is trainings. We usually contract like a certain number of trainings. We distribute those trainings across the team depending on who needs it more than others. Our trainings are really small, super focused. They're always like either one or two departments. And the reason that we do that is because our trainings, while we teach important principles, how to prompt, how to like do tool calling, how to use deep research, like all these things that we have like a pretty good curriculum now, although it's constantly evolving. We train people how to use it by solving specific problems that they have. So for example, like this compliance example that I used, we created the GPT for them. And then we gave it to them in the training session about how to make GPTs. So we did all of the work to make a GPT that's going to work really well. And then we trained them on how, from their perspective, they're like, oh, they're just making this GPT with me over the course of the training session. And I'm hands on keyboards making it too. But the reality is we have like all the prompts that we've used in a Notion doc and we know that it works really well because we've tested it a bunch. So all of our trainings are super hands on
Right.
keyboard and very
Right.
interactive. And people have that sort of magical feeling of I've just built something. I was given the gift of an hour of time to play, And out of that hour, I came out with a tool that's going to completely change the way that I work. So we want to try to do that every time.
Yeah. And so that training is Yeah. And so that training is like in the compliance or the private equity example, you've interviewed a bunch of people, you've identified a bunch of opportunities or workflows that have the potential to be solved through generative AI, the opportunity to create magic moments in solving them. And the training then becomes the both the building of the tool as well as the training of how to use it. So it's like it's learning how to use a tool that solves a problem for you more so than it is
Yeah,
learning
we've done it,
about this technology in the
the
abstract.
latter, and the adoption is just terrible because you're not solving real problems. You're just showing somebody
Yeah.
something that's really cool. So like at the end of our trainings, let's say like somebody's contracted for 50 trainings. They'll have the team fully up to speed on how to use this stuff and actively using it, but they'll also have 50 basically new products that their team has access to that are custom built for them. I'm calling a prompt a product or a GPT a product. So we've just found that to be the most successful method. I think what's really important to note though is these things can't do everything. Like a ChatGPT is incredible, but it can't do everything. And we sort of have an 80-20 rule. So at the end of phase one, which is this research phase where we build this paradigm doc, 80% of the use cases that we identify can be solved with horizontal LLM that the entire team can use, like ChatGPT. Usually 20% can't be solved by that. And those are what we call cogs, basically like agents that can live in the cloud and run on their own. And those range from like quality of life things. So let's say I'm a sales rep and I want to have research done on an inbound and an email drafted. ChatGPT can't do that, but it's not a difficult thing to build. Like we might build a cog that does that for you. And that's on one side of the spectrum. On the
Right.
other side of the spectrum is like, I want to be able to query, a huge database or like a ton of content from Salesforce and ask it questions. And like, that's more of like a godly view of things. And that would be on the other side of the spectrum where it's like, this is a big project. And often what we'll do in those cases, if somebody's really committed to building something like that, is we'll bring in one of those EIRs from the studio, come in and build something like that.
Gotcha. And so just to play that back, a typical project, and of course, I'm sure there's no like typical project, but like the average project, you go in, you do this research phase, you identify a bunch of workflows, you then build solutions to those workflows, that are then kind of instantiated through training. 80% typically of the kind of solutions, the magic moments, can be done with your off-the-shelf, GPTs and, prompts. Sometimes, however, there's the need to invest a little bit more into a solution, and that form can either be a cog, which maybe is some like agentic solution, or maybe it's something, more intense than that, like a product. And in those cases, you bring in the EIRs from the studio who are expert in building AI products to build those products
Well
for your
said. Yeah.
clients. Is that like a fair sort of characterization of? Yeah, cool. When it comes to workflows, you've worked in finance and media, presumably other areas as well. Based on all those, all that work, and also I guess the work that you do internally in the studio, what workflows make for a good magic moment? Are there sort of criteria that lend a workflow to being well solved by your process or by kind of
I mean, it's
deploying,
gotten so
you know,
good now that like it really runs the gamut. Like my head immediately goes to anything that has a documented process is something that like you can easily offload to an AI. Anything that has a work product that is like summarizing information can be assisted by AI. Obviously, you still need to like verify and put in some of your own strategic thought. And probably the best use case is when your time is used by another person because you have some sort of knowledge or some sort of capability or skill set. Being able to bundle up your knowledge or your capability or skill set into a prompt, into a GPT, into an individual product so that other people can have access to it and you can go do more strategic things. So I gave you the compliance example. Another great example is the analytics team at any company. There's people peppering them all the time. But if those people have a GPT or some sort of prompt or product that leverages advanced data analysis, you can give that to members of your team so that they can do this analysis themselves. Um, so I guess to summarize that, 'cause I just said everything. Anything that has a process or a defined process or there's a specific knowledge or skill set needed is something that's really good to start with to create magical moments of alleviating kind of drudgery from your team's work so that they can focus on strategic things.
Yeah. How many magic moments should clients of Every expect? Is
Totally. I mean, it's
there
going to
like
be at
napkin
least
math
equal to the
to
number
use
of
a
sessions that we have.
Every term?
So if we do 10 sessions together, it's going to be minimum 10 magical moments. Definitely more than that though, because very often we'll solve 2 problems during a session or 3 problems of various sizes. So minimum equal to the number of training sessions that we do. But the real magical thing is that your team now has the skill set to go continually do this themselves. That's really what we're trying to do, is get them to a point that they can build these things themselves.
Yeah. You mentioned, some of the criteria of a workflow that would lend itself to a magic moment. What about in terms of company like type or industry, or vertical? What company types or verticals or industries are good fits for
So
Every and its
right now
approach?
we're working with a lot of financial firms. So VCs, PE firms, hedge funds, and a lot of more legacy tech companies, I'd say are like really good fits for us. So people that are not at the forefront of technology, but but recognize the urgency of getting there. Those have been really good fits for us. And that's not just like sort of like older tech companies. It also is a lot of services businesses that are kind of around financial firms. So it's businesses around financial firms and legacy tech companies are really like great fits for us. Then of course, a lot of media companies want to work with us. It's just, that's a really tough business right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess you are a media company that is building solutions to media company problems. Does that make it an easier sale? I mean, I guess do you find often that people are using your products before going in to the organization? If they're a media company, for example, are they using Spiral? Is anyone using Spiral?
Sometimes, vast majority of our clients read Every, so they have a
Yeah.
predisposition to Every and understand our perspective on the world and on technology, and they are usually like pretty aligned with it. And then they've very often tried out a number of our products, but are not the ICP for most of them. Aura is probably the one that like most people are either using or on the wait list for, and then a lot of times people have like tried out products, but then been like, I'm sending Spiral to my marketing team, or like I use Sparkle, but I just use it on my personal computer.
Yeah.
It's the
Why
best
should
writing on the
people read
internet.
Every?
No, it's really thoughtful takes
Yeah. For
from
someone who
very,
hasn't,
very smart people that are thinking about AI and the development of technology really hard. We're not really putting out like news and the latest updates on AI. We are talking about what's tip of the spear with this stuff, and how, as you, as an actual end user, what's important and what's not important. Because there's a lot of stuff coming out that's just like cool, but not important. And as practitioners, we can tell you this is important. Don't really worry about this other stuff.
yeah. Yeah. What, as people who are kind of pushing the AI conversation forward, both through writing, through building, through advising, what excites you most about the next 12 to 24 months of AI development?
Yeah, that's a tough question because there's so many interesting threads being pulled right now. One of them is like the agentic work that's being done. There's so many people that are trying to figure out how do you actually get these things to do knowledge work actively, not just as a companion to you. So that's one really interesting thing that a lot of people are trying to figure out. Obviously, developing and building with AI is like probably the most important and best fit right now. I think that's like furthest ahead of any use case for AI is coding with it. So there's a lot of vibe coding right now. A lot of it is like kind of slop, and it's people just like sort of flexing about something that they've made but not actually as useful. That will become very useful. So I'm really excited over the next year or so for a lot of the tools that we all use day to day to have AI built more natively into it. so that I, as like a non-developer, can actually build products that I use personally and nobody else has access to. So like the emergence of like luxury software is definitely going to become more of a thing. In my personal life, a great example of that is I needed to I'm doing PT right now for my knee, and I wanted to like get a habit tracker. I just didn't like any of them, and I definitely didn't want to pay for this. So I just had Bolt build me one. That's luxury software that I now have. No one else in the world has this, but it just works for me, and I was able to curate it to exactly what I need it to be. So the emergence of that at work is going to be really interesting over the next year. And then I'd say the last thing that I'm really excited about is people want AI to be have godly access to their information inside of a business. The reality is all of our businesses make so much information all the time, and it just cannot process that well. And in the next year or so, and deep research is the first thing that like sort of is proving that this is possible. How can you have an AI recursively go through a shitload of information to give you actually good insights and not just get overwhelmed with like having access to every single thing all the time? That's going to be deep research is probably the most exciting thing that like I'm playing with right now.
Yeah. And I use deep research a lot. For people who are listening to this, can you give them the 30 seconds on why deep research is so exciting?
So what deep research does is it looks through a ton of information. It goes out and it finds a bunch of sources for a question that you might ask. And it's able to return back to you a really good report on the question that you've asked. And this is not a new type of interaction. People have been using AI for this for like since it launched. But the issue is when you give an AI 100 resources and you ask it to read all of them, it starts reading, and then by the end of reading those 100 resources, it's kind of forgotten the first part of it, and like maybe the middle part's a little fuzzy, but it really remembers like the last part. And the report that it gives you is just not very good. And deep research is the first time that they've figured out how it's able to basically recursively go through every single source. First of all, it's able to get the sources for you, but then it can recursively go through every single source so that you can have a high level of confidence that the report that's given back to you is really potent and has information from every single source that is weighted equally, or it's done a good job of weighting what's important and what's not important. It hasn't just forgotten about certain stuff. So that is something that's really special, and like I learn new stuff every day because I just ask deep research about it.
Yeah. And I guess the tie-in to business intelligence is that deep research is going out and kind of scanning the internet, which is, I don't know how many sources and how many pieces of information are out there, but lots. In the BI context, it would be going out and scanning your internal information, of which there's lots, but less, to come back with, perspectives analysis that BI tools today just can't do. Yeah. Cool. Let me end with this. For people who've been listening and are inspired by what you've shared, what's kind of one quick win that they could pursue like right after this interview?
I'd say if you're a business owner or like an executive, get a hackathon going with your team. The most important thing is that your team is using this technology and is playing with it. And if you do something like a hackathon or some sort of competition, you could start to change your culture to being builders with this technology instead of just begrudgingly using it or using it and realizing it doesn't work for something. My recommendation is just give people time to play with this technology, and a little bit of time away from just getting the work done.
Yeah. Awesome. Brandon, I really appreciate you coming by and sharing the Every Consulting story. For people who are listening, Brandon can be found.
I can be found at Brandon at every.to, Brand_Don _Gell on X. That's probably it. Yeah.
Was there another Brandon Gell on X?
Yep.
What a bummer.
Yeah.
Awesome. Brandon, I really appreciate you coming by. Thanks again. Cool. All right.